Say good afternoon to all, and thank you for joining the League of Women Voters at our 53rd annual meeting. I can't believe it's 53 years. This organization has been having annual meetings in the Virgin Islands, and we are delighted to have today as our keynote speaker, the Honorable Senator of the Senate President, the Honorable Donifred Gregory of the legislature. Before we do so, however, I just wanted to let everyone know that we had an exciting business meeting this morning in which we elected a new group of individuals who are going to head the organization over the next year. I'm pleased to have been reelected as president. We have a dynamic board members comprising individuals from both St. Thomas and St. Croix. We approve the activities of standing committees, the Planning and Environmental Quality Committee. That's a very dynamic committee that is going to be working on an outstanding list of projects, including waste management and recycling opportunities for the Virgin Islands. We look forward in the media for editorials and activities from that committee. We also spoke about the Voter Service Committee, which is being again reactivated and dynamic this year with the elections coming forward. We'll again be doing Meet the Candidates forums, and so we invite everyone to look forward for our presenting candidates for elective office on television. And in addition to those two committees, we have revitalized our Government Services Committee, which is now going to be headed up by former Senator Alicia Bonds, along with one of our members from St. Croix, Denise Singleton. And so that's going to be a very dynamic committee. We created an ad hoc committee that was developed out of a discussion toward the end of the meeting to investigate the matter of the dynamic and unexpected and frightening increases in post office box fees. And we learned some really shocking news about that. And so that ad hoc committee will be moving forward. And so we invite individuals to look out for activities that will be coming forward and information coming forward from that new and ad hoc committee. So it was a great morning, and we ended the day with looking at a great video on why it's important to vote. And it was a video that was done by a rapper, and that is using rap language to talk about how important it is to vote and why it is important to vote. So now we have the afternoon session, that is the open session for the public. And we are delighted to start off today with the Honorable Donifred Gregory, who, despite being sidetracked, and clearly not so, by COVID-19, she is here today to deliver her presentation on challenges and opportunities as seen through the legislative lens. And Senator, I want to say thank you so very much. Even though you are quarantining and not quite over it, you are still finding time to rise to the occasion. Everyone
Absolutely.
knows you as Donifred Gregory, and I think many people in the Virgin Islands probably think because she served one time as a Commissioner of Education that we can describe her as an educator, but that's not really all that Donifred Gregory is about. She has worked in government for close to 35 years, and her background actually is in finance. She has worked at the Department of Justice in the Attorney General's office as the CEO, and she has been involved in quite a number of other government positions that utilized her training and expertise in finances. But she thought after a while that she needed to get into politics, because she said people have to step up to secure a future for the Virgin Islands, and those who have the talents and the means to do so should do so, and she did. And she is. She is only the third female president of the legislature. And that's an impressive thing indeed in itself. She says, please do mention that I'm a mother of 4 and a grandmother of 2. So in a bunch of all of these wonderful accomplishments, she is truly an outstanding person. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And of course, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. This is indeed an honor. Of course, I wish that we were able to meet in person. And while I'm a bit under the weather, I made sure to doctor myself up to ensure that I did not miss this opportunity. This is an excellent opportunity, and I am delighted to be here. I'm really humbled by the League of Women Voters invitation for me to be today's keynote speaker to such an illustrious organization. From time to time, I may have to take a sip, so bear with me. And, I must commend all the members of the League for staying engaged and interested in your organization's continued steadfast commitment to protect and encourage voting here in the Virgin Islands, to empower voter registration through education, and to advocate for voting rights here in the territory. And as I contemplated the topic provided for today's discussion, challenges and opportunities as seen through the legislative lens, my mind kept reverting to the electoral system here in the Virgin Islands. And as our electoral system is undoubtedly discussed during the election cycle every 2 years, I want to share with you how I kind of navigated that process during my presidency in the 34th legislature, and how I was able to get major legislation passed despite how we are elected here in the territory. Of course, you know that I am currently serving my 2nd term as a member of the legislature, and only, as noted by Dr. Molinar, only the 3rd female president of the institution, elected by my colleagues to be the administrative head of the institution and the presiding officer of legislative sessions. Serving in the institution, in an institution such as this, with 14 other unique individuals, is in itself a challenge. Each district elects 7 members by plurality of members, and therefore we are definitely competing against each other during the election season. After being sworn in, we are tasked with working together to benefit the people of the Virgin Islands. And all of us, I'm sure all of us on this call, we've witnessed how that has worked for us over the years. It has proven to be difficult, and it continues to be a difficult task, especially when elections are contentious or contested. Each senator comes to the body politic with his or her own legislative priorities and agenda. And these agendas are often competing and can create lots of discord. So there's a lot of energy that occurs behind the scenes in the legislature. When I was elected in 2018, I shared with some of my colleagues the possibility of us working together in subcommittees to discuss issues and draft legislation that were really most important to address the challenges here in our territory and the community overall. And as a freshman senator, I was not successful with getting that done. However, I often pondered as to why senators did not focus on issues and were willing to work collaboratively to address and remedy one issue or a particular set of issues together. But of course, a lot of it has to do with how we're elected. And after being selected by the majority caucus to serve as president of the 34th legislature, I began having serious discussion with my colleagues and discussing my thoughts on this matter of us working collaboratively I discussed this with the majority and I pitched the idea to the majority caucus to form subcommittees within the institution. Some, to say the least, were unenthused by the idea. However, I was still able to convince most of the caucus members to give the concept a try. And in fact, the subcommittees in the 34th legislature was formed for the first time in the history of the legislature of the Virgin Islands. And we were able to really sit down and begin to address critical issues facing the territory and strategies for same. In January, those three subcommittees were established and written into the rules of the 34th legislature to address long-term issues that have been plaguing our community for a number of years. Each committee is led by a chair, similar to the structure of the established committees within the legislature. We were able to establish the subcommittee on GRS, which is Government Employees Retirement System, Restructuring, Solvency, and Economic Development, the subcommittee on Energy and Infrastructure Development, and the subcommittee on Public Safety and Health. My colleagues actually have grown to appreciate the work done collaboratively through the subcommittee process. And I proudly report today that the creation, or my brainchild of the subcommittees, has proven to be a success. And in fact, some of my colleagues who were most vocal in pushing back on the idea are now touting the success of the subcommittee process publicly. It is my hope that future legislatures will continue with establishing subcommittees, because it is so important that we work together collaboratively to address the issues that are important to the people of the Virgin Islands. While we come with our own agendas, it's just so important that we have that laser focus on those issues that are critical to the way forward of the territory. Through the subcommittee process, the 34th legislature was able to, and some of this is information that you already have, but I think is important for me to share, to enact legislation that changed the composition of the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority Board, and mandated that the Water and Power Authority hire a turnaround company and provide the people of the Virgin Islands with an assessment on right-sizing our utility authority here in the Virgin Islands. And of course, what was equally important to us is increasing efficiency and reducing costs whilst keeping WAPA as a publicly owned entity. The matter has been challenged and by the executive branch, and it is currently before the courts. So it is my fervent hope that the matter will be swiftly addressed and we could really move forward with the business of addressing many of the vexing issues that we see in, or we experience actually, with the Water and Power Authority here in the Virgin Islands. The subcommittee process, we were able to enact legislation that merges fire and EMS. This has been a long-standing discussion, I believe, since Governor Farrelly was governor. I think he had an executive order around, fire and EMS merging and working together. And that piece of legislation basically brings in line the Virgin Islands in line with what is done all over the mainland, and interestingly enough, in many of our Caribbean countries. So I'm proud to say that we are one step to moving our healthcare system, our healthcare, in the right direction as we experience emergencies here in the Virgin Islands. Of course, the most publicly discussed subcommittee is the subcommittee on GRS, and through that committee, legislation was passed, which would be Bill number 34-0188, which is commonly referred to as the GRS Rescue Plan or GRS Solvency Plan. And I want to take a minute to discuss this measure because we all know that the Government Employees Retirement System insolvency was an issue that many of us has campaigned on through the years, and I am no exception. I campaigned on addressing it when I ran first in 2018, and when I ran the second time in 2020. And if I'm going to be upfront and honest with you today, one of the primary purposes of creating the subcommittees was specifically to address GRS. I couldn't see us doing it any other way. I couldn't see us doing it individually. I would say that the government employees retirement system was one of those issues that kept me up late at night, woke me up early, and caused me to read and research relentlessly. And I am proud to be a leading voice of the group that worked tirelessly and collaboratively with the governor and his team to successfully address what we all know has been a long-standing vexing issue that has caused anxiety amongst our retirees, as well as anxiety among those of us that are working women in the government daily. The successful passage of this legislation is truly an example of teamwork and collaboration. As we all know, that no one person could have gotten this done. And the work of the subcommittee has not concluded. We still have some work to do when it comes to the government employees retirement system. There's still more work around the board structure, accountability measures, and investment opportunities. We also formed, as I indicated earlier, the subcommittee on public safety and health, and its focus on the Behavioral Health Mental Health Act. It was a Mental Health Act, I believe, of 2020. We are now in 2022, so it will be the Behavioral Mental Health Act of 2022, which was sent down by the governor in, I believe, the 34th legislature, in the 33rd legislature, and we've been since working on it, and it's being worked on tirelessly in the subcommittee of the legislature currently. The Behavioral Mental Health Act is an important piece of legislation that will lay out the necessary structure on how we address the long-standing behavioral and mental health issues we see here in the territory. We cannot continue to ignore them, from facilities to outpatient services, etc., to early intervention, to how the judicial system works. We have to work this collectively and move this issue forward, because this issue affects all of us at some point in time in our lives or our family lives. We know that behavioral health and mental health awareness overall has not been something that we've talked about it, but there's always been a stigma around it, and it has been neglected here in the territory. So we work on it in silos for many years. And the subcommittee, with the leadership of Senator Novalee Francis Jr. as the chairman, has been working diligently on getting this legislation to the floor. I took the challenge on how we are elected and created an opportunity that I believe has netted success in the subcommittees. The importance of having all senators involved, no matter where we sit, whether it be majority, minority, or what party we represent. It allows for matters that are most important to the people to get the attention it needs. So I'm very proud of that. And I look forward to seeing, like I said earlier, to seeing that as a continuation in future legislatures as we traverse the landscape of politics here in the Virgin Islands. Of course, there must be new direction here in the Virgin Islands and within the institution of the legislature for future focus. And our territory continues to face critical issues, which means that the 34th legislature still has a lot of work to do and major pieces of legislation to consider. We know that this is the election cycle, but I am very committed to ensuring that we stay focused. As the president of the institution, my responsibility is to rein my colleagues back in and get us to refocus on where we are and where we need to be going to ensure that we remain focused on the people's business. But as I shared earlier, the behavioral health legislation is a measure that I would like to have heard and enacted prior to the close of the 34th legislature. And like I said, the measure is being worked on in the subcommittee on public safety and health. And it is expected that the Committee on Health, Hospitals and Human Services will hear this measure later this month under the leadership of Senator Francis. And after it is heard in the Committee of Jurisdiction and prior to being vetted in the Rules Committee, we intend to have a Committee of the Whole so that, you know, members of our community can weigh in and give their perspective on this important piece of legislation. And we are not working this legislation independently. We are also working with the judicial branch to ensure that we have a comprehensive piece of legislation, because many times we know that individuals who have mental health issues in particular, or behavioral health issues, they end up in our judicial system and in our prison system. So it is important that we engage all of our stakeholders. It is my hope that we can work out the kinks and the measure can be voted up and sent to the governor for consideration prior to the close of the 34th legislature. So there's much more work to do. Another matter that is of importance is the establishment of the 6th Constitutional Convention. And the League of Women Voters, you were instrumental in getting the question relative to adopting the revised Organic Act or parts thereof as the Virgin Islands Constitution on the 2020 ballot this past 2 years ago. During the Committee of the Whole on May 10th, we will hear from the community on said matter. Bill, that is Bill number 34, that's 0153, which proposes the establishment of the 6th Constitutional Convention. The Committee of the Whole will allow members of the community to participate and have their voices heard on this issue. This measure is an emotionally charged measure, and it is important that all interested voices, all Virgin Islanders in the community, be heard on this long-standing matter. As we know, for many years, we have heard the same voices on the Constitutional Convention. And it is my hope that new voices will engage, and if they do, and if they do not, they will have been provided, know that they will have been provided with the opportunity to do so. So we put the word out to ensure that all concerned, all interested, come before the legislature and make their voices heard with regards to this particular matter. It is critical, it is of critical importance that for me, that during my time as president of the institution, to allow all sides and views on the issues to be heard, which is intended to facilitate decision-making from an informed perspective. Way too many times decisions are made when we are not informed, or we expect others to inform us, and we are not seeking out the information for ourselves. It is also important that as I speak to you today, that I share with you a piece of legislation that is of particular interest to me, that I will be relentless in moving through the legislative process. And that piece of legislation is the Bureau of School Construction and Maintenance. That bill actually failed in committee on the Education and Workforce Development by a 3-3 vote with one abstention, but not because it was poorly, it didn't fail because it was poorly drafted. It was a poorly drafted measure, or a measure that had no merit, but it failed purely on feelings at the time. So we still have a lot of work to do in the institution and as leaders in the territory, but I'm committed to continuing to push forward and bringing my colleagues along with me. And I submit to you today, the members of the League of Women Voters, that we must get serious about the state of education in the territory. We've talked about it for many, many years. And I am and will remain adamant about moving this measure forward. Last year, I was very successful in getting the former Adelita Cancrane Junior High School property transferred to the Virgin Islands Port Authority to expand and grow our maritime industry. And as a territory, we are poised to service the entire Caribbean as we expand our blue economy and the opportunities that it will bring to us as Virgin Islanders. The time to invest is now. And while I am proud of the legislation and the economic impact of that transfer and what it will have for this territory, what makes me prouder is the fact that this legislation is a provides a permanent funding source for the maintenance of our school facilities in the Virgin Islands. And you could not imagine, I don't think you can, how hard I had to fight to get a win on this one. A lot of times as legislators, we don't really share all of the information, but it's important for us to work behind the scenes with our colleagues to get consensus. So, you know, that what's important is getting consensus and moving the landscape forward for progress in the territory. We must continue to keep and to be open-minded and to take chances on innovative approaches for and to reform. We need our community support on moving legislation that addresses our student success, our educator success, and the infrastructure needed to propel them to excellence here in the Virgin Islands. And the measure that I mentioned would allow the administration of the Department of Education to focus on educating students, with the Bureau being tasked with maintaining, inspecting, constructing, renovating, repairing, and modernizing Virgin Islands public schools, buildings, facilities, and grounds. The intent of this measure is twofold: to have safe, modernized facilities, and to shift the focus of education solely to academic achievement of our children.
5 minutes.
The department to focus on curriculum and student achievement. Imagine less than 1 month after the failure of this crucial measure, the AFT were protesting in the streets. So I think it's a wake-up call for my colleagues. And you said that I have 5 minutes, so I'm gonna have to move this along. I wanted to talk a little bit about cannabis, but I'm going to table that for another time. And I'm going to talk about, let's see. I will talk about
I'll have to invite you again.
Opportunities for women leaders in government, right? So as this is a League of Women Voters meeting, it is appropriate for me to address the opportunities for women leaders. The time is now for women to become actively engaged in their community and their government. We cannot continue to sit by the wayside and sit by the sidelines rather, and have conversations amongst ourselves. We need to have conversations within our community, out in the community. We need to have a face. Women generally make great leaders because they lead with a sense of compassion, a sense of responsibility, and let's face it, we are very thoughtful leaders. We are thought leaders. As women leaders, as a woman leader, it is my responsibility to identify and mentor other women. Just this past March for Women's History Month, and in celebration of International Women's Month, I hosted an event recognizing trailblazing women and women entrepreneurs and young up and coming women in our community. It was an eye-opener for me to see how many women in our community are small business owners. The women in this community are the backbone of small businesses. And as we are well aware, small businesses drive this Virgin Islands economy. The event created an opportunity for women to come together and collaborate. It also created, what was equally important for me, is it created a safe space for women to learn and be mentored by each other. And I plan to continue the work, and I encourage other women to join me in doing so. Legislatively, it is important that we be deliberate about not creating laws that discriminate against women. And I was incredibly pleased to cast my vote in support of a measure that made it illegal to discriminate against natural hair. While it may seem negligible when compared to the grand scheme of challenges we have here in the territory, many women in the Virgin Islands wear their hair in its natural state, and it is our responsibility to protect them. We must also be deliberate about protecting women and children. Women are the majority head of household in the Virgin Islands, and women are also the majority victims of crimes against persons here in the territory. And I recently strongly advocated for increasing notification for victims of crime against a person in March of 2022 legislative session, which had significant opposition. But I am thankful that through my efforts, I was able to gain consensus and support of my colleagues in supporting the measure. And the governor has since signed the measure into law. We should look to seek opportunity in every challenge.
1 minute.
As women, we face challenges daily, and we should create opportunities not only for ourselves, but for other women. We should do so by scholarship, sponsorship, and mentorship. Women have and continue to be elected to the Senate to represent the people, and we need to get a space where we are comfortable with a qualified woman leading the U.S. Virgin Islands. And collectively, we must work to remove the bias associated with women leadership. And since my time is going, I'm going to say that I close by leaving you with this factoid. While women continue to be elected and serve in the Senate, I am only the third woman to lead the institution as president after some 68 plus years. I ask you, the members of the League of Women Voters, and all women within the sound of my voice, should I be the norm or should I be the exception? And what can we do collectively to change the narrative? I am here to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Senate President. What a beautiful, beautiful presentation. And what's not only what you said is so impressive, the fact that you said it is very impressive, given that you were ill and you filled up all of the time. I thought that perhaps you were going to stop short.
No.
but you were clearly passionately involved in what you were saying, and that drove you along. And I want to say thank you so very much. You set a fantastic example. And essentially, Senate President, you answered the first question. I was going to take a prerogative and ask of the first question as president, but you answered it up front. And that had to do with women in government and occupying leadership position. But I think that you demonstrate so very well the value that women bring to the table in government. We had a history in the legislature of a lot of infighting, but here you were, a woman, suggesting, let us work collectively, bring everybody into the table. Everyone has an equal voice. And that's a revolutionary approach as far as the VI legislature is concerned. And look at all you have been able to accomplish, all of the things that you have just pointed out in areas of major significance to us here in the Virgin Islands. I should say that your language that you use is so very much League of Women Voters. You spoke about having new voices and informed voices. And the League of Women Voters is all about informed actions. And whenever we speak, we always say that we bring our program, Meet the Candidates Forum, to the public because we want people to do an informed vote. And when we headed up the education program for the referendum, we did so as requested by the legislature, the 33rd legislature, to do so, because indeed we wanted to foster an informed vote on that question. And so we applaud you for your stance, and we too are hoping that with the vote on the bill that's going to come up after the presentation on the 10th, that it will have done so with informed knowledge. I know that you need to rest, and so we will just have a few questions from the audience. And I know that that Lisa, you were collecting the questions. I don't see any questions that that you have posed, but I know that one came from Felicita Richards. Oh, here are the questions. Okay. The one question is, please explain, this came from Felicita Richards, please explain how the proposed Education Maintenance Bureau would be administered. How would they collaborate with the Department of Education administration and the Board of Education?
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Richards. The Bureau literally sits in the Department of Education for budgetary purposes, but it also sits, the leadership reports directly to the governor. The Commission of Education sits on the committee, as well as the Board of Education sits on the committee. So it will be a collaborative effort. The needs of the department will be addressed by the Commission of Education and collaboratively worked on with the Board of Education, but there must be a concentrated focus on addressing the issues in our schools, what was happening now. And the legislature also has culpability, because what we do is, it's not really a priority as far as the maintaining of our schools, because I've sat in the legislature for the past 2 years, and we appropriate $1 million. And we know how many schools we have, $2 million for summer maintenance. We cannot, the focus cannot only be on summer maintenance, it has to be on year-round maintenance. We have a number of dollars that's sitting in the PFE that's been sitting there for many, many years. The process has stymied the Department of Education from really being able to move those projects forward. So there's a number of things that's impacting the ability for us to really make that a priority as we are building new schools. It's important that what has happened with Bowski and St. Croix Educational Complex, those are pretty much new schools in the territory, that we don't see that again, that there's a maintenance plan and there's a focus on ensuring that we are able to maintain our schools here in the Virgin Islands. It's time for us to take a chance and take the risk on doing something different. And I see that we've done it for many other things, and I think it's time for us to take that chance on our students and our children.
It's a brilliant idea. I see Senator Genevieve Whitaker has a question. Could you please unmute? We have given you permission to unmute, Genevieve. Could you?
Thank you, and good afternoon to you, Dr. Molinar, President Molinar. Good afternoon to all the members and participants, and certainly good afternoon to guest speaker, Senate President Donna Gregory. I have more of a comment, but also not so much of a question of my colleague.
Could we ask you, Senator Whitaker, to limit it to a question, because we wanted to let the Senate President leave early.
Okay. Well, the question.
And we have a number.
Okay, so I'll put it in the form of the question. Just to her, just in terms of both the your efforts regarding youth. Did you want to put on the record your efforts concerning the reestablishment of the Legislative Advisory Council, for which you and I worked on specifically, as well as yeah.
Well, I can basically share that we've reestablished, that legislation was passed by Senator Positive Nelson a few years ago, actually when I served as Commissioner of Education, and since becoming president, with your leadership and myself, we've actually reestablished the Youth Advisory Council in the legislature, and we have a number of students in the program right now, and it's running very well. But what we haven't done is, I don't know that we share enough with our community so they can know exactly what's going on. That's something that I'm going to try to leave that legacy, at least for the next president of the institution, that we develop a venue, a vehicle rather, to share information with our community outside of the legislative process.
That's an excellent suggestion. I think so, because when you talk about all of these things that you are doing and have accomplished, I said, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And so, yes, there needs to be a way of sharing the information with the public. But I'm curious though, what were some of the reasons why people were not in support of the bureau, of a bureau for that? What were some of the main objections?
You see me smiling? Other than the bill is too big for me.
No.
That's some of the women issues that we face.
Oh,
I mean, I didn't hear anything that was salient other than, you know, I can't answer that. I listened to the hearing, I watched it again, and I was like, and that's why I said that, you know, it wasn't that it was crafted, it was a bad legislation. It's just that, you know, politics is the order of the day. And sometimes things that matter to the people of the Virgin Islands, it really gets caught up in the politics. And this is why it is so important for our people. I know that we're very busy. We have so many challenges of our own, but we really need to pay attention to what's happening in the legislature and on that Senate floor.
Was public opinion requested for that bill?
Yes, I've been working on this since the 33rd legislature, and I brought it in December just for public opinion, and I got a lot of public opinion. Initially, when I drafted the legislation, it was to have a standalone entity, and the feeling was, you know, we've had too many standalone entities and they don't really work. Let's try to do something different. And interestingly enough, some of the folks that I actually worked with to give me the ideas around, so how do we develop the legislation into a bureau, they voted against it. So check the record. That would be my recommendation. But like I said in my delivery today, that I intend to be relentless about moving this legislation forward. So if I didn't use the right strategy before, it's a lesson learned, and I am going to push it forward. Push forward with getting the information out and sharing the information, putting the necessary op-eds out there. Senator Genevieve Whitaker is a member of the committee, and she did support it. She was one of the yes votes, I must say. So, you know, it's something that I'm willing to work on. And I am not one that wants to take credit for all of the work. Although, you know, I drafted the legislation, you always have to, I think it's so important that you collaborate with others, because there's so much more information. And I actually did that, so much more that you could add value to the work that you're doing. So again, I'm hoping that I can bring it back in the 34th, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time focusing on that. I'm going to pray that I'm reelected for the 35th legislature, and it's going to be one of the first things that I bring forward. But I must make sure that I do it with purpose. So I understand that.
And it's such an important topic, and we need to get more of the more public involvement in that, because it seems at face value such an important piece of legislation that must get passed. So I know that we had said that you would end at 1:15, and I know that you do need your rest.
Okay. You have a little headache now.
Yeah. Jump back in there and be rested for next week. I want to say thank you so very, very much, Senator, for the time that you spent with us, for sharing your ideas and the future. And the League of Women Voters will be looking to see where indeed, and if indeed, any of these activities that you're suggesting fit in with our plan, and what we can do to participate in activities.
And thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you so much for your leadership. And it was indeed a pleasure to be here. I didn't want to miss it, so I make sure I docked up myself today.
Thank you so very much.
Okay,
Again,
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. All right.
We are standing up and applauding.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to sign off.
You're welcome to stay on for the rest of the afternoon.
Okay, I'll stay on for some of it, because I'm definitely interested in the information. So I'll make sure.
Great. Very good. Thank you so very much. And now we move on to the second part of our afternoon program, and that is a panel discussion that we're going to have on a topic that the League of Women Voters has as one of its primary goals for the past, for the 2 years, begun in 2020, and that should continue. And that is our focus on a constitution and political status for the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have done some work in the past, as the public well knows. We worked with the legislature and were selected to run an educational program for the ballot vote on a referendum in the 2020 election, which was successful. And we were very pleased to work with former Senator Myron Jackson and Senator Alicia Barnes and a number of other members of the legislature, which I should also say the entire legislature voted to approve that the League of Women Voters serve as the educators for that referendum vote. So continuing with our goal, we thought that during this 53rd annual meeting that we would have a panel discussion on the Constitution and political status. And as we developed the program, we thought about who would participate in it. And I mentioned to the board that at one time I had shared when I was a guest on the radio program of the late Senator Holland Redfield, that I was a participant with, along with Gerard Emanuel and former Senator Attorney Ronald Russell. And what a wonderful discussion we had on the topic. And I had remember at the time thinking to myself, this is a discussion that really needs to continue. And so I posed to the board that we invite Gerard Emanuel and Ronald Russell to continue that conversation, and the board approved. We approached both of them, and both said yes, they would really enjoy being a part of this. And so I welcome Gerard Emanuel and former Senator Ronald Russell to be a part of today's discussion. I'd like to just very briefly introduce them. I think everybody knows Ronald Russell. He is a former senator of the U.S. Virgin Islands legislature, and he served for 10 years, and he was elected as president of the legislature in 2011. He attended the University of the Virgin Islands and got his degrees in chemistry, music, and law from Rutgers University in New Jersey. And I don't know how many know that he taught music and math on St. Croix. And many St. Thomians may not know that Ronald Russell is quite a musician. I forgot to ask him what instrument he plays, but he's a great musician and very well known on St. Croix, and he's now in private practice in law. Gerard Emanuel is also a Crucian, and he has both of his undergraduate and graduate degrees from University of the Virgin Islands. He spent his adult life as an educator in jobs that involved history and culture, political status, public administration. I don't know how many of you are aware that he was the political status educator at UVI in their Department of Bureau of Public Administration. He has also testified before Congress and the United Nations on political status. And he has participated in a number of programs and has written numerous articles on self-determination. What you may not know, many of you may not know, is that Gerard Emanuel also studied Danish, and he attended the University of Copenhagen, and he became quite fluent in the language, and I was surprised to learn that myself, that he's a fluent speaker of Danish, and so he has been able to read many of the historical documents regarding the role of Denmark and its relationship with the Virgin Islands. But many of you know Gerard Emanuel as a passionate Virgin Islander who has worked really to secure the future for our Virgin Islanders. And he was, interestingly, a delegate to the 5th Constitutional Convention as well. So having said that, I'd like to invite our speakers, Gerard Emanuel and Ronald Russell, if you could put on your videos so that we can see you.
I have my video on. Can you see me?
Oh, there's Ronald Russell. Okay, great,
I have-
great to have you, Ronald Russell. I know that you had a
Thank you.
jig last night. You didn't say what instrument you played.
Yes. Guitar. I'm a guitarist. A guitarist.
Oh, you're a guitarist.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. I wasn't
Yes.
quite certain. Could you lower your video, your camera? Yes, there you are. There you are. And Gerard Emmanuel, can you speak so that we can hear you and see you?
Testing.
There you are.
One,
There you
two,
are.
three.
An educator in front of his vast library. Well, I'm so delighted to have both of you here today and for our discussion. As I told the audience, we had began this conversation when we were chatting with the late Holland Redfield on these very same topics. So let me ask you, a lot of people, when I told them that this is what we're going to be discussing, some of them said, well, with all the things we have to worry about, education and WAPA and COVID, why are we still talking about a constitution and political status? Why do these topics need to be on the table when we have all of these other issues there? So let me ask you, how do you justify talking about political status and constitution?
I'll defer to my
Right.
mentor, Senator Russell.
Well, let me make it very simple. The foundational document for all of the laws of the states, of all the territories, and of the United States and all countries, the foundational document is a constitution. And if you don't have a constitution, the foundation for your law and your whole judiciary, it's at a loss, really, because you pull in from other people's kind of, impression of their values and the laws that control them. So it is the foundation of constitution, and it should always be in the forefront until we get one, because we don't have any foundational law that we drafted.
And indeed, it is true that if the Constitution talks about how we govern ourselves, and if we don't have a say in how we govern ourselves, other people will be telling us how to govern ourselves, right? Other people tell us how we are to be governed. So a constitution is indeed an important. I think Gerard, you would agree with that as well, right?
Yes, I do, and I hope we start to disagree a little bit in the future, because we can't be all agreeing here all the time.
No. This is common ground here. The next question I'm going to ask you is that if indeed we're going to be talking about political, so what is political status? Political status really defines our relationship with the federal entity. Isn't that correct? We would agree on that. We agree.
Well, it defines our relationship to any other place in the world. It just happens that we're a territory and we have a direct relationship with a mother country that we call the United States of America. But if you're an independent country, you are a member of the independent states in the world, so they know your status. So it's your relationship with any other entity, any other political entity in the world.
Okay, having said that, let's then move on to a point that I know that you're on different sides of the table on this, but I'd like you to make your case to the public. There are some and the subtitle of this is "Who's on first and what's on second?" And that's a playback to an old Abbott and Costello joke. Who's on first and what's on second. But as far as this is concerned, there are those who say that you have to define your political status first before you can write a constitution. And there are others who indicate that that is not necessarily so. You can have your constitution and take your time about defining your political status. Let me hear your comments about this. Give your arguments.
Let me start first on that one, since I have the most controversial position. Normally, you would start with the status because that's the foundation. And that establishes the parameters of what you can write in a constitution. Nobody would argue that. But what is also important, and even more critically important, is the context, the situation in every territory, and that's not the same. And I think that the context for the specific circumstances that are unique to a territory trump what normally takes place. Let me give you an example. The Virgin Islands, Guam, and Puerto Rico are unique compared with almost every other place that was a colony and achieved independence or some more self-governing status. Why? Because of the largesse of the United States. They opiate us with federal funds and social security benefits and grants and aid and a whole lot of nice things that people are willing to give up. Let's contrast that with the colonies in Africa in the 40s and the 50s, with the colonies in the Caribbean, except for maybe the French colonies and the Dutch colonies. Their mother country gave them nothing, really. So they had two choices, independence or independence. Because it didn't make sense to stay as a colonial territory when you're not getting anything from your mother country. So the context that surrounds every entity must be taken into consideration when you decide whether or not you want to deal with status first. And the problem in the Virgin Islands is that it seems like many people are satisfied with our status. We know we're being exploited, but we seem to be better off than places that even became independent. So that is the problem why I think that we can't just jump to status in the Virgin Islands, because we don't meet the necessary conditions. And the other necessary condition is that you have to have unification between a large number of people in the community and the political leaders. This has been consistently the case in every case where people move for status change. It has not been the case in the Virgin Islands. And until that is the case, I think we need to deal with the Constitution.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Russell.
Yes. The issue of status is governed by the quality of life of people. If people like the quality of life, being an American citizen and having the bells and whistles that America gives, as Gerard said, the opiate. So status is going to be a problem. It was always a problem. But more importantly, you don't need status to draft a constitution, because the constitution is people drafting their laws in values and in a document that represents their collective value. And you, to be guided properly, have to have a legal document that says, we don't accept killing. We don't accept the death penalty. We don't accept certain things in our community. And the fundamental document that defines that is your constitution. The problem is, and we get a little off track recently, is that you got to draft your own constitution. The reason why when that document is interpreted, you have to look for the history of the document. And if you use a document that's drafted from somebody, you will never have the history of that document because somebody else drafted for you. So why it's important now, especially, we have our Supreme Court. We have our Constitution. If we get it, we can now interpret our laws as we see it, as long as we don't violate the Constitution of the United States. And to me, that's real autonomy. So I believe status, it's going to come, but now is in the time. We need to adopt a constitution. Thank you.
Okay, so it seems as if then that both of you agree then that you don't need to do political status before you do a constitution for the Virgin Islands. I should say that there's strong disagreement with that. But let us look at the reverse then. were you to attempt to do political status at this point, what issues do you see might be of concern to that might interfere with arriving at a conclusion about a status? Are there any key issues that you see that stand before us? Because what you're saying now, what you both of you have said, is that political status is a difficult topic for discussion in the Virgin Islands. What are the difficulties in that discussion?
Well,
Let me
you go
Let me
ahead.
hit one. The biggest, and the public should know me and Gerard are childhood friends. We're still friends. And we know how to agree to disagree and remain close friends. Okay. The economic issues that a capitalist nation would face if we become even towards some semblance of independence is one. It's a tourist destination. I don't know, how we will survive in a global economy by ourselves. And then number two, we have become a melting pot for the Caribbean that has changed the dynamic of whether people want a quality of life where they came here or they're from here and they believe certain things are more important than the quality of life. We melting pot. We don't pass that kind of situation where status, I think, is important because people come here because they love the islands and they have access to the American way of life, whether it's material, education, or health, it's real. So, I don't think status will make it. The biggest one is economic, and the other part is the quality of life will suffer. Many people believe that would happen if we become independent or establish another status different from what we have now.
Well, I agree with Attorney Russell. Where I differ with him is that fundamentally I'm for independence. Let me say that up front. Whether we get there or not is another story. But I believe that any entity, whether human or political, should be striving for self-autonomy and self-sufficiency. Suppose the United States gets a government, and based on what's happening in the United States now, this isn't far-fetched. They decide, man, we don't need these people down in the Caribbean. Let's sell them and get Greenland, even though Denmark said that's not on the table. What will we do then? We have to act as though we are going to be kicked out of this union with the United States and prepare for self-sufficiency. If we get independence, fine. If we don't get independence, fine. But we need to prepare for it. And that's my position on this whole thing. Secondly, status is not something that is unachievable. We go to the same colleges as all the people all over the world who decide their status. They're not smarter than us. And they're starting from a point that's lower than we're starting from. But like Attorney Russell said, the problem is psychological. We feel we love the United States, but because you love the United States doesn't mean going for independence means you hate them. I love my children, but they're independent. I want them to be independent. I love them even more because they're independent. The United States might love us more when we become independent, but we don't think that way. You see what I'm saying? So I don't think it's impossible to have status, but the question you asked, Dr. Molino, is what are some of the divisive issues and things that come up? Attorney Russell addressed one, and it has to do with who can vote, who should participate. But he also mentioned something that I agree with. We need to come up with a different basis for national unity other than place of birth. That's the 19th century. That's the 20th century. This is the 21st century. The reality is all kind of people are coming here. And if we don't start now trying to find a way to band everybody together, whether it works or not, but let's try. The natives are going to be more and more of a minority. And because we don't seem to want to form any basis or unity with everybody else, how do you think we're going to be treated? It is in our own best self-interest to try and form a government, form a society that takes into consideration our specific context. This is a cosmopolitan society where people coming from all over the world for all kinds of reasons. Let us make something, let us create a glue that can hold us together. And that glue, as it was done with the founding fathers in America, is governmental principles that everybody can adhere to, that will treat everybody equally, and that will help us grow and develop as a society. That's my position.
Interesting indeed. Ron Russell, what do you think of that?
Well, I think, and I hate to, I'm not getting political, but leadership makes a difference. Because I thought that, you know, Governor Cyril King made significant changes in the Virgin Islands. And he was only there for a short time. He's a good governor. I think, you know, the leadership and then the education, you know. So I agree generally with Gerard and that moment at time that we reach a point where we could come together. It's not now, but we could come together, and there are ways to do it. There are ways to do it. The common interest that would bring all the people together, and leadership is a key element, because leadership would find ways to bring people together and solve that problem that Gerard is mentioning. And, you know, we have a problem here like that because there's so many different ideas and views. And we have a golden opportunity if we draft the laws properly and then engage the people. So I'm that it'll come about where we have a unity, but I think leadership is going to make a big difference. Thank you.
No doubt about it, that leadership is so very important. And when one looks throughout the Caribbean at the independent nations, one sees how important leadership is. Those that are swimming versus those that are sinking, it's really very much related to who's at the helm. Yep. But I think, Gerard, you made a comment that that was really a very shocking comment that I think a lot of people had never thought of. And that is the fact that the United States could possibly say, we don't need them anymore, let's get rid of them. But, I mean, referring to us. But the fact of the matter is, and one can say they might have also said that of Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico is really a big financial burden to them as well. And here's Puerto Rico thinking of the possibility of becoming a state, and they're probably saying, what, huh? To become a state with all of this burden? I'm really not quite sure we want your company. But this is, I'm asking Gerard, how likely would that occur? Look at the demographics that we have here. One has only to walk down Main Street on any given day when ships are not in, and you say, well, who, you know, I don't recognize anybody anymore. Do you think the demographics would allow for the thought of independence? Were we to think of the possibility of independence?
Yes. Because if you look at what's happening in the United States now with the Supreme Court is no longer a neutral body. I mean, I have to tell you straight up, the Supreme Court is laying the foundation for a civil uprising in America. Pure and simple. And if that occurs, we up a creek without a paddle. So we have to prepare for a situation that, a worst case scenario, that's what I'm saying. And yes, there are a lot of different people that live in the Virgin Islands, but they come here for a reason. A lot of them don't like this, the hustle and bustle in the States. They're retired, they want to come to a place where they can live peacefully and mingle with people who are not going to get into a whole lot of political foolishness. And I think this is our opportunity to really form a new basis, and I'm sounding like a broken record again, a new basis for unity based on principles. We could do it. Now, independence, I don't know if that will ever happen, but that's not the point. The point is you prepare for it. We have all these kind of proverbs. When your neighbor bed catch fire, what do you do? Wet yours. You don't wait until your bed catch fire to wet your bed. It's too late then. So I am saying that's our people were so wise. If we follow all these aphorisms and proverbs that they're saying, we won't be in trouble. But we get into all these petty debates about native this and non-native that and constitution first and status first. The thing with status, that's the foundation. But we have to take into consideration our specific circumstances, broken record again, and act based on that. And if we do that, we'll be fine.
Well, let me bring up this this other question. During the 5th Constitutional Convention, of which you were a member, Gerard, there was a question of native rights. Where do you stand on that? Could you just explain what that concept was about native rights, and what's your position on this concept of native rights?
Okay, it's embarrassing. I was one of the leading proponents on native rights, based on something Senator Russell said at another forum. Because when you look at the public law, it says we're supposed to follow all the United States laws, but it's stuck in the word treaties in there. And when you stick in the word treaties, that means the transfer treaty. We were defined as inhabitants. And as we know, back in those days before the League of Nations and the United Nations, an inhabitant was really a foreigner. That's a fact. Read the Law of Nations. It says that inhabitants are part of us in a country, but they're not citizens. They're foreigners. So the US put that term in the transfer treaty, and we felt that was an affront to us. And that gave us the right to demand certain things for natives because of the atrocious way that we've been defined. However, it wouldn't work. Washington didn't listen to it, and we never really pushed it. But what we need to do now instead of native rights is fight for reparations. That is difficult to get, but that's more realistic because that is dependent on the slavery history that we've had, as well as the first 14 years of American rule under the Navy. A lot of atrocious things happened there, and we should get compensated for that. Now, some people might say, well, what about those persons from other islands that were taken advantage of in the late 50s, early 60s, and early 70s? I think if they need reparation, they should apply for that too, because they were treated unfairly, not only by the US immigration laws, by some native Virgin Islanders too. I mean, these are inconvenient things that we don't want to accept, but we have to come to the point where we grow up, admit what was done wrong, and formulate strategies to move forward in a unified way. So yes, native rights was a big issue, but the real issue is this though. Native rights are really for people who are marginalized, not for people who run the government. We just had the Senate president who's a native, my cousin, running the government. You know of any indigenous people out any place in the world that run the legislature in the country? And then the more inconvenient question. If you want native rights, you need to be like American Samoa. They refuse US citizenship. You know why? Because they knew what their native indigenous institutions were and they wanted to practice them. Ask us, where are these institutions that we want to practice that we denied from practicing now? Who wants to go back to making fish pot and dressing in grass? These are the realities that people don't think about when they talk about native rights. It doesn't apply to us.
That's a great comment. So, Ronnie, what Gerard is saying there is that who are the natives? What do you mean by native rights? Do we have a right to ask about native rights?
Some people focus on it. And let me say that I consider that a distraction to the Constitution. No offense to anybody. And bringing it up in the context of being a territory of the United States, I think, it was an issue that they tried it, and I commend them for trying it, and it wasn't successful. Because you could try things, the Constitution go up and it's rejected for various reasons, and then you correct it. Okay. But I think when it came back, it was the distraction that derailed the 5th, because they won't let it go. The issues that you raise, Ms. Molinar and Dr. Molinar, regarding, the native rights, the ability to have our autonomy, my view is that the Virgin Islands have benefited greatly from being a United States territory. And we have achieved autonomy beyond belief. And we have a golden opportunity to carry it even further. And people just don't realize the reality. The reality of being a United States territory after other islands were devastated and didn't have the benevolence of a country. I think it was $8 billion come to the Virgin Islands. Now, and we constantly getting money. And because it's a capitalist nation, money drives everything. So we're supposed to be a beacon for this United States of how to spend money, how to lead in education and healthcare. We could be that way. And the way we do it by giving these talks, where people who understand how government might work and it could work, would provide the information to the people. The Supreme Court and the Constitution go hand in hand. You can't interpret a law that you didn't draft. And that is why the Supreme Court of the United States could interpret the Constitution, because those people drafted the Constitution. And that's the fundamental problem with the legislation moving forward. You can't adopt nothing because then the history of it is not lodged in you, the people. The history lodged someplace in Congress, and then you adopting that now. So I think we got to hit the nail on the head. This law that was an attempt to try to hurry the process, I think. And as the saying goes, hungry dog eat raw meat. Gotta be careful. And what happened? No, you gotta say, I'm saying this here, no offense to nobody, the sponsors of the legislation, it was misguided. And we need to change with this community as a whole, change what's going to happen so that we can move forward as a territory and get something adopted.
Okay, so let's say now we have moved from the topic of political status, and I wanted to begin with the question of political status, and now we're moving into a constitution. Let us talk about the discussion of a constitution. Before we do that though, let's define what a constitution is, because I think a lot of people confuse when we're talking about a constitution with what we mean about political status. So Professor Emmanuel, define what a constitution is.
Well, at its basis, it's just a body of laws and rules and practices that governs any kind of organization. That's basically what it is. Now, in the context of a government, it comes up with procedures for electing people, removing them from office, and for allowing people to participate. But one of the fundamental aspects of a constitution of that type is that it has to have things in it to provide equal treatment for everyone. Can't be a constitution if you have different categories of citizens. That's so fundamental in a constitution. Now, the US Constitution had that. The problem was the way the South was, they wouldn't even have a constitution if the North didn't compromise. And they were right to do that because they had to fight a civil war, and then they got slavery out of the way. Why did I go there? I listened to Senator Russell. Now, this is where we are 180 degrees removed from each other. He's saying that we really can't adopt the Organic Act because that's a federal law and that's their history. And if we do that, we won't have the history of our document. We have enough history already. We had 5 constitutional conventions. When you read the public law, nowhere in there does it say that we cannot adopt the document that was created by Congress. It doesn't say that. What it does say is that we have to be consistent with everything in that document. Dr. Molina, what is the best way to be consistent with a document other than to use the language? Nobody's adapted, but that's just one reason. There's a more fundamental reason why we're doing that. And nobody's talking about this. The way our referenda laws are written, to pass any kind of binding referendum, and a constitution will be a binding thing, right? you must get 50% plus one of the electorate. We have never gotten that in any referendum. Never, at least in my lifetime. How are we going to do that? Any document that we write that is different to the Organic Act will by necessity have something in it that some group in the population disagrees with. You see what I'm saying? The more things you put in a document, the more opportunity that exists for divisiveness, or people don't like this, and we will never know what people like. So common sense tells us we cannot keep doing the same thing the same way and get a different result. I don't like the Organic Act as our constitution, and it's a misrepresentation of what we're doing to say that. We're not adopting the Organic Act because we love it as a constitution, we love Congress, and come on, we've always said it's a boilerplate, it's a template. It is merely a strategy based on our history to come up with a document that's pretty neutral, that could garner the support of a majority of the electorate. And I would challenge anybody, tell me of any other document that we could draft that is going to get more popular support than this document that everybody pretty much knows about. There is no other document. So if we get that document passed, and that's the only reason we're doing it, to get a document passed, then we could spend time coming up with amendments, proposing them every general election, and people will have an opportunity to really focus on the changes that they want. And they could vote for this amendment, they could vote for down another amendment, but we'll have a constitution. And eventually over time, we will get a document that really reflects us. But we'll never get to that level if we don't have a document that everybody could, not everybody, a majority of the people could accept as our document. So that is the basic reason for doing that. It's not that we love the Organic Act.
Great. Okay, that was a question I'm going to ask. But before Ronnie responds to that, which I know he's itching to respond to, I just wanted to make a correction. Would you call it would you call the Revised Organic Act a federal document? Because when the League of Women Voters was doing its education process, we pointed out to the people that that document was really fundamentally changed by local Virgin Islanders themselves on both St. Croix and St. Thomas, who played an active role in bringing about some major changes in the revised in the Organic Act. So having said that, let me move on to Ron Russell. You are not in favor of the Revised Organic Act as the basis, but
contrary to the actual law, and anybody could look it up, Public Law 94-584 actually says that the legislature of the Virgin Islands is authorized to call constitutional conventions to draft. It didn't say adopt, it said draft. And I am strongly in the belief that when they wrote a referendum, they didn't read the law, because the law said draft. And the reason why people are expected to draft their own constitutions, let me go back a little bit, and why they have an open election, and it shouldn't have no 50 signatures and everything. It should be open election, because the Constitution is supposed to be drafted by the people that it governs. It's the highest governing document representing the values turned into laws that people hold dear. So you have to draft your own constitution so that when you get a Supreme Court like what we have now, they interpreting the laws that the people drafted. They're not interpreting laws written by Congress or that, okay? The second thing is we have graduated to a Supreme Court now that has the same power of any state Supreme Court. That to appeal the Supreme Court, you could only go to the US Supreme Court. So any interpretation of our laws that we drafted from our Constitution, the Supreme Court let it lie, because we draft it. And that's why these states are getting away with murder, drafting all kind of draconian laws, because they're using their state constitution to say we could ban abortion. And that's part of the problem in the nation right now, but we have a golden opportunity to draft our constitution and have our Supreme Court that's ratified in 2012, Obama signed the law, so that we could have the same value and authority our state would. So this revised organic act thing is not wise for us. And most importantly, it would be challenged because it said draft, and in the language section 2, it's expected that the convention drafts, send it to the governor send it up, and then it comes back for the people to adopt as drafted by the convention. So convention draft, send it for review. They approve it, and then they send it back to here to have adoption of it.
Okay, so let me ask
Yes,
Gerard,
go ahead.
how do you address that objection, the use of the word draft?
You see, we could get involved in splitting hairs, and attorneys are good at doing that. I could draft some. Let me go ahead. Go ahead.
No, Darren, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. I was just saying, it's there in the language. That's it.
I don't disagree that's in the language. Because somebody say you have to draft something doesn't mean you can't use the language that was there before. If I like the language that was there before for the purposes, the singular purposes, this is the point everybody is deliberately overlooking. I don't want to use the Organic Act, but we have to use it because of the way that the referendum laws are set up. Tell me of any other document that you could draft, that we've drafted in our history, that has even come close to getting a 50% plus one turnout. This is the only, and I challenge anybody to argue this. That's what I'm looking for, which is more important than the content of the document being something that we really, really want now. We have to have a document that could pass the law, the referendum laws that we have now. Tell me, if you could tell me which other document other than the Organic Act that people are fully aware of now that is going to do that better, I would like to hear it. But there is no such document, because the fact of the matter is you're going to be putting different things in there in a diverse population. Who knows who's going to like what and who's not going to like what? The point is we need to sometimes, what's the word, stoop to conquer. It doesn't look good to accept the Organic Act. I understand that. But we way beyond that thinking. It's not a matter of optics. It's a matter of practicality. What is your real goal? Your real goal is to get 50% plus one of the people to vote on a document. That's the foundation. And I guarantee you, if we don't try this method, with this divided population, we're never going to have a constitution, and we're going to be stuck with the same Organic Act that you don't want. And that is the fundamental point that I don't think anybody wants to admit. What kind of document are we going to draft that is going to garner more popular support than the Organic Act? Please answer that question for me.
There are several documents, Gerard, and let me point out to you. The only reason the fifth failed is because certain delegates were adamant in certain provisions, okay? The fifth was a gallant attempt, okay? Now, several years later, new people in the territory, new and young and vibrant leaders, I hope, they're ready to move forward. Any document that has the correct publicity and information, if people here paying attention, they'll vote for it. And simple, it's very simple. You have to inform people, and the League of Women Voters doing a great job. A lot of people want these political forums that they have because people want to be informed. So with a constitution drafted, I guarantee you that when you start to explain, you have a Supreme Court. Incidentally, both of them went up to be signed by the governor the same day in October. I was a senator sponsoring both of those legislation, and both of them were signed the same day. And so they go in tandem, Supreme Court Constitution. And if you explain to the people the importance of the document and why it has to be adopted, I think we cross that bridge. And we cross that bridge not only by 50+1. We get 60% of our people to vote, because the education and the messenger have to be the right messenger, of course. But education, you have Facebook, you have all kind of things. Oh, we go get it out.
You still haven't addressed the issue, you know. I'm sorry, Dr. Molina. What is going to be the content of that constitution that's going to be so neutral that it's not going to alienate anybody? You're not addressing that. You're speaking a good law, you talk, but I'm not interested in legal niceties. I am wholly pragmatic. We know what we have, we don't know what's going to come in another document. We always talk about acting based on history, but when we don't want something, we don't want to act based on history. The only history we have are the 5 drafts that we've had. None of them, the first draft wasn't for our convention, that was something else. Let's say 4. None of them has produced a document. None of them has gotten a majority vote. And the population has become even more diverse.
Yeah.
So your logic is good when you're talking about static population, that people come out and vote. The population is getting even younger. The people that vote are the older population. I have members in my extended family that don't want to vote, regardless of all the stuff that I'm doing. So I'm saying we need to look at the population who actually votes and do something to get them to come out and vote. And if we don't do that, I don't see, you haven't said what kind of document, what content is going to bring out more of a majority than the Organic Act.
Okay, I'll give you some issues. The Virgin Islands writing in its constitution that we need a separate and distinct controller and inspector general who is not beholden to the governor. He will be beholden to the people. A provision that says the attorney general is not hired by the governor, but written into the constitution that the attorney general is elected or appointed and then can be removed. An issue about renewable energy, fooling around with WAPA, fix it, fix up. These things, you put them in your constitution and you say, we want renewable energy, and by a certain time, you use the constitution to change the relationship with the United States Congress, saying, going back to the treaty, that Denmark had owned Waikos for so long, and you had a foreign nation owning that. Well, give us some more authority to control our ports. The issues that you would generate so much interest here because people care about them. If you pass in legislation where people care about, they don't pay attention. But once you mobilize the people and issues that deal with the quality of life, that it's something that could touch them, I think we're good. Thank you.
Dr. Molina, I have to respond. You see, this is where being in the shoes of a constitutional delegate makes a difference. 3 of those things he mentioned, I had proposed: electing attorney general, electing inspector general, all those kind of things. You know who was against it? Your colleagues, the attorneys. The attorneys were the ones who were against that very thing. So I don't know who you're speaking on behalf of. I'm not going to call the names of them. They didn't want elected judges. That's another thing too. They didn't want elected attorney generals. They like it so. So I am saying that's the group you're going to alienate. So you just punctuated my point by bringing those things. Now, one of the other things you mentioned, yes, we talk about WICO. There are people here that don't want to give the local government any more control, and they vote. You see what I'm saying? So let's start with a document, because anything you mention that's not there now, because most of the people aren't objecting to the Organic Act now, so it stands to reason that they support it to some extent, right? Let's start with that. It's only a start. That's Dr. Mullen. It's only a start. We don't want to keep it. And then we vet amendments singularly or 2x2 so everybody can see what they are. That makes so much sense to me.
Okay, that's an interesting point that you're making, Gerard. So let me rephrase the question to you, Ronnie. Essentially, what I hear Gerard saying is that we adopt the revised Organic Act. It comes back, the people voted, and then the people, over a series of elections, will vote for or against certain issues that go into creating what will eventually become our Constitution. So that one then would have to ask you, Russell, if indeed you presented a document, we call it now the 6th Constitution, and there are issues there that a group of people that Gerard was talking about object to, then the whole document goes down the sink again, and we have another failed Constitution. Whereas if we did it piecemeal, where the population then say, okay, we're voting now on elected Attorney General. We're voting now on what was the other thing that you
Inspector General.
Inspector. Yes, an independent auditor. So the whole document doesn't go down the drain because there's a group of people against it, but that particular issue now is removed from consideration as part of the Constitution. Wouldn't this then be a better way of developing a Constitution for us, rather than presenting everybody with a whole document and the people agreeing with 90% of everything that's there, but this one other issue just bites one group of people, and this other issue bites another group of people, and so they're going to condemn the whole document. The 6 goes down the drain again. So wouldn't this be a better way of doing it? I think that's what you were saying, Gerard, right?
No, you said it much better than I did. Thank you.
Okay, so Ronnie Russell, what do you think of that idea?
The problem with that, fundamentally, a constitution must be written that it can be amended on the whim of the masses at a given time. And so the process that is being suggested would undermine the whole Constitution. A constitution should be limited to certain amendments, and there should be an overwhelming majority of people who approve an amendment. And the way Gerard is saying it, you're never going to get that. You can't get it for the Constitution. And most people don't know the revised Organic Act. There's so many provisions outdated, and we have moved way past that. And they think that that document is so outdated that it's sort of comical to think that you could use drafts from that. That document had the governor being appointed, had so much things. That document had us receiving benefits that we don't get. So, that document is outdated. And what we need to do is rely on this newer generation and the efficacy of how, media is now, and we could get this done.
Yes, but let me just point out, though, that indeed we are currently governed by that, are we not? So you're saying that it is outdated, but that is what we are currently governed on.
No,
it is not outdated in the sense that there have been amendments that we're no longer having an appointed governor. We do now elect our own governor. So indeed, there are other amendments that have come on that have changed these things that you're referring to. I also wanted to point out the recent publication by Dr. Malik Sekou and Dr. Paul Leary that is almost essentially a guide to the Organic Act. And I would suggest that people look for those documents from Dr. Sekou's office. I know that there were a number that were printed for distribution to the public. A sort of a guide to the revised Organic Act, and you should indeed look at that.
Okay, let me comment on this. Okay, the revised Organic Act is, compared to the 5th Constitutional Convention draft, is so outdated. The Fifth Constitutional Convention was drafted well. It only had certain issues that the public would resist. It had good publicity. And so, you know, I don't see us having to adapt anything. We just need to sit down and draft what we think the public would accept and move forward. Don't compromise, because there's another document you compromise. And it sounds to me like you're compromising, putting the document out which you really should put out. And then when you think you'll come back and change it, you'll never get change. That's the same, Gerard, the same thing. You're coming back to change it, and nobody will vote for your change. So you might as well put the document out that you want from the beginning. And if you want an elected attorney general, then get it. Thank you.
Yeah. The difference, though, Ronnie, is that you don't drop a whole constitution. The way you're suggesting it, you drop the whole thing, and all of that money was wasted. $150,000. I think.
But that assumes that assumes. Wait, hold on. That assumes that the leadership and the proponents of a new constitution can persuade the people. Remember, Gerard, we not young.
1 minute.
We not young.
1 minute.
So you got to be sensitive to the context now is 2022. It ain't 207, and it ain't 1950 and 1993 and them kind of times. We are in a different time, and I believe people would approach a constitution now, especially with the Republican right doing what they're doing. A constitution that could protect women's rights should be there in the one day. You write it in there. A constitution that will protect other things that this territory needs. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Moderator, could I get some time because time is up?
Yes.
Ronnie always makes cogent arguments, but there's one other reason why I think it's important to adopt the Organic Act that nobody has really been mentioning. The revised Organic Act and its amendment is what we're talking about, not the 1954 draft. And that's what Dr. Muller
Time
mentioned.
is up. Time is up.
That's why I asked you something.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. Go ahead.
What we are overlooking is that there are things in the Organic Act that people don't even talk about. If we draft a new document and we don't look at the Organic Act, we left that out to the fifth. For example, the cover over program that we have that is being used to fund the GERS now. That whole program that will be gone because we didn't put that in the Constitution. When you draft a new document, that's it for the Organic Act. Everything is just gone already. So it makes sense to start with what you have and then go through to the fine-toothed comb to see what needs to be changed and what we need to keep. So that is something that we will lose if we don't use the Organic Act. And I'm sorry, Dr. Molina, but I think that is the best way to do it because I don't see how we're going to predict who is going to like what and who isn't going to like what. We're not God.
Okay,
You know, I'm going to close with this aphorism. Montesquieu said, if you really want to be on top of the people, you have to really serve the people. You have to look at what they really want, and that's how I end it.
Okay, so let me just Senator Genevieve Whitaker indicated she wants to know what is there about 94-584 that would enable the legislature to mandate. We also do what provision enables the legislature to mandate. I don't think the legislature can mandate that the revised Organic Act of 54 be adopted by the elected delegates. Is there any? I don't think there's anything that allows them to mandate that. Is there?
Yeah, there is, and the legislation is drafted like the convention delegates have to do what the legislature wants, and that's sad because they may have felt that the referendum mandated that a convention has to do certain things, and the legislation it needs to change. It's a draft, and we understand drafts need to change. This one needs to change because in Section 2 it does mandate. You have a duty to. You say, yeah.
Does it say?
That's not the question.
Does it say that it is mandated that they do? I thought it was an either or. They said is it an either or? Did they say or to consider the revised Organic Act? I didn't see. Yeah, yes, Gerard?
I thought Senator Whitaker's question was whether the legislature could mandate that a constitutional convention do something. And the answer is no.
Yeah.
When you create that body, it's an independent body, it could do what it wants, but
Right.
that's legally.
Exactly.
But see, my point is the legal basis is not the only basis upon which you make decisions. Ethically is something else. Once the people voted and said they want you to adopt the Organic Act, if you don't do that, I mean, you have the legal right not to. But then what's the sense of how are we going, we're cutting off our nose to spite our face? We're creating a document that we want people to vote on, right? But when they vote on something, you ignore it and want to come up with what you, the enlightened, think is better. That is not democracy. That's hypocrisy, and that's being a dictator. The people said that they wanted you to adopt the Organic Act as the first draft of a constitution, and we think we know better than the people. No, I agree. The legislature cannot demand or command or force a convention to do anything, but it could impress upon them the fact that the voters said what they wanted. You can't get rid of the elephant in the room, you know, Ronnie, because we can't talk about democracy and then we have a chance to practice it, we ignore it. That's hypocrisy, not democracy.
Right.
If the map was misled, they can come up with a wrong result, Gerard. If you mislead people with legislation, even the legislation question was flawed, and it misled people because the public last said draft, and then in the legislation here, I have it here for everybody, the Constitutional Convention has the authority and duty to, and then you go around. How do let's say duty tell them the convention delegates you have a duty to do certain things? No.
Okay,
That's
let me ask a question since we're talking about the convention itself, and then and it is this. You know, we've had 5 tries at this. We spent a lot of money in it, and there's some who are suggesting that if we adopted the 5th, that it's going to go down the tubes again. And that's another one lost, and then people are going to talk 10 years from now about a 7th. So the question is, what must happen to make this convention a successful convention moving forward? And I know that you're going to have different opinions, but how can we make the 6th more successful than what has happened in the past?
Well, I could answer that very concisely in a few sentences. Do what the bill says with a few amendments and make the 6th Constitutional Convention the last convention. Create a permanent constitutional commission or something. And that body would feel amendments or any kind of changes that need to be made to the document. But we have to have that boilerplate document as the first item that voters can consider, because it's the least controversial document. And I say any change that you make to it is going to cause some group in the community to be against it. And that's part of the 50% plus 1 that you need. So we can't bite off our nose to spite our face. Let us get this document passed. And if you want us to draft it, Ronnie, we could have the convention sit down and write out everything that's in the Organic Act, and they will be drafting it. When you draft something, it doesn't mean you have to draft something different than you see on another paper. If you really want to be technical, they draft in it. They agree with the Organic Act and they draft in that. That's drafting. It doesn't mean you have to come up with something different than that's already on a piece of paper. So I'm saying we're getting into all these intellectual niceties instead of forgetting the big picture. The big picture is we want a constitution. We don't want the Organic Act. But as Senator Dr. Money said, we've tried so many times the same thing. Let us try something different. If it doesn't work, then I will listen to you. But I can't agree with doing the same thing again a 6th time, and then it's gonna fail.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you, Senator, Mr. Emanuel, and I just wanted to make a correction to Mr. Russell that indeed states do change their constitutions. As a matter of fact, there are some states that have thrown out the constitution not willy-nilly, but wholeheartedly and started de novo, and they've done this several times. Some states have indeed done that. And they do have, as Gerard Emanuel suggested, they do have commissions that look periodically at their constitutions and determine whether they need modifying, and the people do vote, and the people do vote on those changes. And there is a high margin of turnout that's expected for those kinds of votes. I know that there's a new bill that is coming out. I understand that 340230 is a new bill that is coming out by Senator Gittens that is talking about voter numbers. That is an interesting one. The League will be testifying on that next week, which might make it easier for us to get vote things passed. So having said that, Mr. Russell, your turn.
Well, you know, I differ with any premise that would feel that we have to adapt. Why? Because they were fifth. This was the fifth one, sixth one. Why the fear of failure is part of this rubric? Because we don't have to fail. This is a new 2022. And my daughter graduates from college. My children are adults. Gerard, your children are adults. It's time to let them weigh in on a constitution. New generation, new ideas, and new demographics and who gonna vote. And that's what I think will drive this, because you got new ways of spreading the word that just wasn't, we weren't accustomed to it. You got Facebook, you got Twitter, and you got Instagram. You have a whole new platform to spread the information. And I guarantee you, if you spread the information as to the importance of certain things, people will get engaged and they will support it overwhelmingly. You just have to know the message. And you have to have a good leader putting that message out.
Yeah.
So I completely disagree.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting point that you made, because Senator Genevieve Whitaker just indicated, there are a lot of millennials who are now coming into the picture, and we have to find a way to reach them with our messages, whether it is pro or con. We have to use their messaging to bring them into the picture. And a comment from Dr. Malik Sekou, who says we must learn not to repeat our errors, rather we must learn from them. And so I think that's an excellent way of closing out this. I want to say a very special thank you to our panelists. It's been a great discussion, as I had hoped that it would be. I would like to talk to our audience and let them know that this is just a part of an ongoing discussion with the League. We will be doing more of these sessions. Please look out for our announcements about more panel discussions that we will be having on the topic. This was a great way of laying the foundation with lots of information, and they were informed discussants, even though they had their own opinions. Senator Russell, Professor Emanuel, thank you so very much for your thoughts, your ideas, your time. And I'm sure each one of you won people to your side of thinking, and we hope that it will be translated into increased voter turnout, increased voter interest in pursuing these topics. And I think you did a lot to inform the community. I want to say thank you also to the Board of Directors for the League of Women Voters, for Marianne, who served as our timer for this session, and our past president, Felicita Richards, who is tuning in from an independent nation right now. She's in Barbados. There on some other business. And it's been a great afternoon, great discussion. Thank you so very much. The League looks forward to everyone being involved in our programs. Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you too.